Welcome to this explainer. Today we're doing something a little bit wild. We are jumping straight from the absolute cutting edge of artificial intelligence right into an ancient linguistic mystery. And it all kicked off with a really provocative question from a student, a question that actually forces us to rethink how we encode meaning, how machines process our words, and honestly, why the writing systems we use every single day haven't gone extinct. So let's just dive right in.
Here is the question. Does learning Chinese give you an edge with AI? And honestly, you can totally see the logic here, right? Think about it. The AI tools we're all playing with today are essentially these massive meaning processing engines. They navigate this incredibly complex web of semantic relationships. Now, Chinese characters are famous for encoding meaning directly, rather than just spelling out a sound. So the inference makes perfect sense. If Chinese is fundamentally a meaning-based script, wouldn't a reader of Chinese bring some kind of cognitive superpower to their AI prompts? Like, does the script just naturally click with the way an AI actually thinks?
Well, as awesome as it would be to unlock a secret linguistic superpower, we kind of have to bust this myth right out of the gate. The short answer, no. There's no major AI prompting advantage. The stark contrast between how human minds work and how machines process data is just too massive. See, for a human trained to read Chinese, there's absolutely this beautiful semantic density, a structural meaning that phonetic alphabets like ours just don't have. But here's the kicker. AI does not read Chinese characters the way you or I would read a book. AI processes text by tokenizing it. It breaks language down into cold, hard, statistical, computational units. So that incredible encoding richness that gives those characters all their deep human meaning, that is simply a layer the AI doesn't even operate on. It's totally blind to it. In fact, the reality is actually kind of shocking. Because of the way AI tokenization systems like byte pair encoding actually work, Chinese characters get hit with a pretty massive computational penalty. Think about this. A single English word might cost an AI just one computational token, but a single Chinese character, that might cost 2, maybe even 3 tokens. So Chinese characters literally eat up more of the AI's context window space. There's zero computational advantage here. The true bottleneck in getting what you want from an AI isn't the language you speak, it's your discipline in building deliberate context and giving the machine precise coordinates to follow. Okay, so when the author of our source material, Jin Lee, gave his student that answer, he realized he couldn't stop thinking about the real question hiding underneath. Because figuring out that Chinese characters carry no special advantage for machines highlights this massive, unresolved historical paradox. Why is it that Chinese is literally the only major meaning-based writing tradition still sitting at the center of everyday mass literacy? Every single other meaning-based script on the entire planet either died out completely or morphed into phonetic writing. So how did the supposedly computationally inefficient script survive? Before we crack that mystery, we need to quickly ground ourselves in what this script actually is. You'll hear linguists use terms like logographic or morphosyllabic. Basically, while most of the writing systems around the world just encode sound, like how we learn the ABCs by mapping a letter to a sound, logographic characters do their own thing. Each character typically represents a morpheme, which is really just a fancy word for a unit of meaning, usually tied to one syllable. The written form isn't just blindly following the spoken sound. It holds its own completely unique visual architecture. And you can actually see the cognitive beauty of this system in action. The visual equations of these characters are just breathtaking. Take the first one. It's literally a person leaning against a tree, and it means to rest. The second one places the sun right beside the moon, 2 massive sources of light, and that means bright. The third one, 3 people standing together, which means a crowd. And these aren't just cute folktales we made up after the fact. This compositional storytelling is historically accurate to how they were built. Reading it sharpens the actual concept in your mind in a way that just spelling out sounds never really could. This semantic density allows for some incredible conceptual compression for us humans. Our source material gives a fantastic example using a framework called Pico-Negri. It's a system for navigating life with intention. Now, to compress its 10 core concepts into English, the author had to deliberately engineer acronyms using 15 letters and a digit. But in Chinese, those exact same 10 massive conceptual anchors can be expressed perfectly using just 10 single characters. That level of compression is incredibly real and incredibly powerful for a human reader, even if the machine's tokenization layer completely ignores the whole thing. Now, let's take a quick walk through the historical graveyard of scripts, because this is where the mystery really thickens. Sumerian cuneiform, it started as logographic around 3200 BCE, but eventually went completely extinct. Egyptian hieroglyphics, visually stunning, incredibly rich, but they literally died out with the last temple priests in the 4th century CE. Mayan glyphs were highly sophisticated but were deliberately destroyed during the Spanish conquest. Chinese characters stand totally alone. They are the sole civilizational survivor on the global stage. I mean, even in Japanese, where characters are used as kanji, it's a derived tradition that leans heavily on phonetic syllabaries just to function grammatically. Pure, independent logographic survival, that belongs to Chinese alone.
So why was this specific script robust enough to survive when all the others fell? Well, the answer lies in 4 interlocking historical factors. Basically, 4 pillars that armored the Chinese script against the erosive forces of time that completely wiped out the Egyptians, Sumerians, and Mayans. These are political unity, bridging dialects, independence from sound change, and cultural reference. Let's break down exactly how each of these acted as a shield. Pillar 1 is political unity and governance. See, when Emperor Qin Shi Huang unified China way back in 221 BCE, standardizing the script was his very first major move to administer this immense, newly centralized empire. It became a pure instrument of governance. And that brings us right into the second pillar, which is bridging dialects. Think about how this script handled the massive, chaotic linguistic diversity of that empire. Spoken varieties of Chinese, things like Mandarin, Cantonese, Hokkien, they are often entirely mutually unintelligible. If you tried to use a phonetic script, spelling out words based on how they sound locally, you'd instantly exclude everyone who spoke a different dialect. But logographic characters encode the meaning, not the sound. This meant totally diverse communities could read the exact same written text. The writing basically floated above all the spoken languages as a shared visual medium. It was an absolutely irreplaceable technology for keeping the empire politically unified. Then we have the third pillar, its independence from sound change. Phonetic scripts, by their very nature, decay over time. As the way we pronounce things shifts over centuries, the spelling gets totally misleading. Just try reading Chaucer's Middle English today. It is incredibly difficult. But Chinese characters, they anchor the meaning permanently. The character for sun has been pronounced completely differently in Old Chinese, Middle Chinese, Modern Mandarin, and Modern Cantonese. Yet the character itself and its core meaning has never changed. With just a bit of classical training, a modern reader can actually understand text written 2,000 years ago. So it bridges time just as effectively as it bridges geography. And the fourth pillar is cultural reverence. In China's civilization, characters carry profound aesthetic, philosophical, and historical weight. You have the ancient art of calligraphy and this massive, unbroken accumulation of historical records. Abandoning these characters for a phonetic alphabet wouldn't just be some simple administrative tweak, it would literally sever generations from their own historical heritage. To put that into perspective, Vietnam and Korea historically used Chinese characters, but they transitioned over to phonetic scripts in the 20th century. And as a direct result, they now face a much, much greater distance from their own classical texts. Now let's look at the Hangul counterpoint, a writing system designed for a completely different problem. Let's talk about the brilliant invention of the Korean alphabet by King Sejong the Great back in 1443. Because classical Chinese characters required literally years of intense study, literacy was basically locked behind elite doors. King Sejong wanted to fix that, so he engineered a phonetic alphabet so perfectly logical that a learner could master it in mere days. This comparison is amazing because it highlights a core truth about human writing. The Chinese script was solving the problem of maintaining political unity across extreme linguistic diversity. Hangul, on the other hand, was solving the problem of mass literacy within a territory that was already linguistically unified. Sejong chose access over semantic density because it was exactly the right choice for his specific problem. It really proves that writing systems aren't just magically discovered out in the wild. They are deliberately engineered solutions to specific, pressing societal challenges. So what does this all mean? What actually dictates whether a writing system survives and spreads across the globe? Well, it is absolutely not about encoding efficiency. Remember, the visually stunning Egyptian hieroglyphics still died out. And it's definitely not about ease of learning either. Phonetic scripts are way easier to learn, yet the Chinese script survived despite being massively demanding. The answer to survival is, and honestly always has been, political power and utilitarian purpose. Think about it. English is the global language today for the exact same structural reasons Chinese unified a subcontinent. Political power, trade, and sheer economic utility made its adoption rational.
Which brings us to this incredibly powerful realization from Jin Lee and our source material. He writes, "The choice of which scripts survive will be made by humans, not machines. And that choice will be about power and purpose, not efficiency. The AI machine we use to prompt and code, it is completely indifferent to how human writing encodes meaning. That tokenization layer doesn't care at all about the rich visual history of a Chinese character. But the human sitting on the other side of the machine, we are not indifferent. We still carry the intention."
AI translation might eventually erode the simple communication argument for learning another language, and tokenization might totally ignore a script's beautiful semantic density. But that leaves us with an incredibly profound thought to chew on. In an age of AI translation and ruthless machine efficiency, what human intentions, what geopolitical forces, what cultural purposes will ultimately shape the survival of our writing systems? The machines aren't going to decide the future of how we write. We will. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning the tools you use, and I will see you next time.